If I may have your attention, please. At this performance, the role of Reilly will be played by Charles Nelson Reilly. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Charles Nelson Reilly.
You like me, you really like me. Well, I like it here. It's very safe over here. And it's very warm. You could get in a lot of trouble up on one of those. This actually is my favorite place in the theater, because as a teenager I started ushering on the left aisle. Direct my plays from here. And I sit on this side in my classes, just like this. It's my place. The music you're listening to is Golden Slipper, Cy Oliver's arrangement of the Negro Spiritual. I'm playing it for you because that's the first song I ever heard, and the first song I ever learned. My mother used to tap with my baby shoes on the railing of the crib. Oh, them golden slippers. Baby's gonna walk on the golden road. And she taught me this in the high chair. Giet hem over bonnetje zit je met zo'n lied in je look in de stoel in die handen aan. My mother was Swedish Lutheran. And my father was Irish Catholic. Well, oh my God, that's the kind of show it is. My father was Irish Catholic and he taught me the tag at the end. So I had all bases covered. I'm glad my mommy taught me the prayer, because whenever I walk on a stage, I always say it. Amen. Enter actor. A voice in my head tells me that I am at the twilight of an extraordinary life. I say extraordinary because of the people who love me, and I say twilight because of what people say to me in the supermarket. Mommy pushing my wagon, minding my own business. And a woman will see me and go, oh, 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 oh. I thought you were dead. We made him look who's here. We thought he was dead. He's in jams and jellies. Whatever happened to you? What was the name of that show with Harry? What was the name of that show we liked? We'll never forget it. We'll always remember you. You were so funny. You'll always be in Harry in my heart. I love you. I felt like saying, it was a lovely service, wasn't it? It's not their fault. They don't mean any harm. It has been in print since 1980. That's 21 years. The same question that write into questions and answers about the celebrities in the Sunday supplement. The first one from the Palm Beach Post, you could see I kept it a while, was from Peggy Hall of Monroe, Georgia. I'll wait. I really will wait. The question, is Charles Nelson Reilly still alive? They call the theaters where I play, and they say, who's playing Reilly in the Life of The box office says Charles Nelson Reilly. And they say he can't be, he's dead. He's got the tall one with the glasses and the wig. He's dead. And the box office says, well, madam, you're right, he is dead. But he still manages to come in and while I'm here, I'll tell you the story of my life. I was born in the Bronx. Let's not have a rally. I want to thank that person from the bottom of my heart. When I say that line in Florida, the house comes down. For you people who are already concerned with the cable cars and that Fakakta Bridge, you know the one I mean. I recommend this runaway bestseller. The Beautiful Bronx. You can pick it up at a clean, well-lighted place for books. Which is a stupid name for a bookstore. I was born in the Bronx, January 13th, 1931. That's an easy one. The only child of Mr. and Mrs. Charles Joseph Reilly, and we lived at 1273 Clay Avenue. My mother, her name was Signe, Swedish, Signe Elvira Nelson, and she was a nurse. But she retired when she married my father. But she still had family in Hartford, a mother, father, and a younger brother and sister. At tonight's performance, the part of my mother will be played by Shirley Booth. My father was a very tiny man, a very, very lovely man. He was an artist. He was in charge of the outdoor displays at Paramount Pictures, at the Paramount building in Manhattan. All his work was done with airbrush and watercolor. Now, unlike my mother, we knew nothing about where my father came. I never knew how they met. You are putting eye drops in that eye?
Yes, you do.
Well, maybe I should stay on this side if that eye is not good. The things you see from the stage, amazing things. I guess the lights of this huge motion picture studio are too bright. Anyway, we didn't know anything about my father, where he came from.
Both eyes.
Where he came from or anything. If he had a cousin or a father or someone. A woman told my mother that she thought he had lived in the YMCA until they got married. Now my father, as I said, was very tiny, and he was lovely. And he'll be played by Hume Cronin. Now I remember when I was very young, my mommy used to yell out the window a lot. You Jew kite bastards, leave my kid alone! Jews, get away from him! My mother wasn't very well liked. And every time she went out, she took a big baseball bat with her. She did. And she went down Clay Avenue to get her hair done on Webster. And she had the bat because there was always a crowd of angry women following her, and I thought she'd be lynched from a streetlight by the time she got under the dryer. And I was glad when she was out of the house and I was alone. I could go in the sewing basket. I had a puppet show! You didn't know that, did you? This is Cinderella of the Bronx. And I'm doing it next Sunday at Christ the King Sunday School. Sister Marie LaSalette said, this is one of the wicked stepsisters. So I have a lot to work. It's not the usual Cinderella story. She doesn't lose a glass slipper. Oh, that's been done. She loses an ice skate. And it's all set on the pond at Van Cortlandt Park. And her Prince Charming is a handsome mounted policeman. And I'm going to have a snow scene at the end with my mother's soap chips. It looks so beautiful. I wish you could come. Now, a father doesn't like to see his only son sewing dolls. So he'd say the same thing to me over and over again. Go out and throw a ball around. Well, I tried. I tried to throw a ball around, but I didn't know my eyes were bad. And stickball is so fast. In the Bronx, it's that little pink Spalding ball. I used to hate to get up to bat because there were two unemployed fathers. See them up there? Those two in the undershirts? Hanging out of the second and third floor windows, played by Bruce Willis and Sylvester Stallone. And every time I got up to bat, they both yelled, Mary's up! So I left the field. And a voice in my head said, maybe sports isn't your bag. So I thought maybe something musical. So I said, Mommy, could I have an accordion? I actually formed that question on my lips. I wasn't even Polish. And this big accordion came in a box like this. Charles Nelson and 100 solos. I learned the keyboard and music from that heavy accordion I couldn't even lift out of the box. I couldn't talk to my mother about anything. Ever. Whenever I asked my mother a question, she would always answer the same. Like, Mom, why does Daddy sit backwards in the tub and this back to the faucet? Save it for the stage. What stage? Mom, why doesn't Mrs. Stillman speak to you anymore in the hall? I told you to save it for the stage. You couldn't talk, I guess, in life, only on the stage with the actors. And when she was really mad at me, she said, I can hardly walk! I can't sit down, I can't bend my knees, I can't lift my legs anymore. Because ever since I gave birth to you, I've had this pressure. And then when she was really pissed off, she would kick in my puppet show. And she would say things like, I should have thrown away the baby and kept the afterbirth. And that was a good day. Years later, when she was visiting me in New York, she would always have her coffee and watch her favorite morning show, which was Kukla, Fran, and I. She loved that marionette. And she'd turn to me and say, "Whatever happened to that cute puppet show you used to have?" And I would tell her, "Ma, save it for the stage." But when I was 4, she took me to the movies. We got our baseball bat and went up 168th Street. Oh, we did! We were going to see Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy in Naughty Marietta. And I remember my mommy carried me all the way because there was a rash of kidnappings in those days. You were afraid to leave a child down. We were going to the Grand Concourse. Oh, wow, wow. And we were going to go to one of the most magnificent motion picture palaces ever built. It's in every architectural book. It still stands proudly today on the Grand Concourse. The Loewy's Paradise. The marquee took up the whole block. And the rugs were so thick it was amazing. Ma, look! And the lobby smelled. And as far as the eye could see, at the end of each aisle there were double golden doors. And in each door there was a round window. And I'll never forget when I put my hands on the golden doors for the first time and I pushed open and I entered my first theater. Mom! There's 2 over here. Don't drop the baseball bat. It's Jeanette MacDonald, Mom. Mom! There's no ceiling, it's only a sky. Look. The sky and the clouds. Mama, the clouds are moving, look! And the stars! The stars are the twinkling lights of the sky, look! Even go right through the ceiling to the sky! Wow! It was so warm there. And it felt very safe, not like at home. And the voice in my head said, "This is a place for you." This is a place for me. When I was 9 years old, something happened that was so wonderful. I got the lead in a school play! That's a dramatic switch that very few actors get. Years of training. I was going to play the lead. Miss Steve Benedetti gave me the part. 480. PS 53 on 168th Street between Teller and Finley Avenue. I couldn't believe it. I was going to be Columbus in Columbus the Man. Sometimes there's such jealousy in an audience. I ran home, I said, "No! I got the lead in a school play! Miss Steve Benedetti's class, I can't believe it! I'm going to say, you can't be in a play! You're too weak, you're sickly, and you're on beef broth. You can't even stand up and play the goddamn accordion. Your eyes are big, you'll never learn all this. You'll never read this even. I'm going to go up and tell that Dago teacher Planet. My mommy was always saying that. I'm going to go down and tell the men that work with your father, I'm going to tell them Planet! So now we were going to take the baseball bat and go up to PS 53 so she could tell Misty Benedetti. Mommy. I was 9 years old when I knew that Misty Benedetti was the most beautiful woman I ever saw. She had beautiful brown black hair that the curls got caught in her lace collars of her velvet dresses. She was everybody's favorite teacher. Antoinetta was her first name. Antoinetta de Benedetti. She was so beautiful. She would be played by Isabella Rossellini. We can get her. She was truly beautiful. I swear, because she was Italian, when she spoke you heard music. And when she took off her glasses, boy, did she mean business. Mrs. Reilly, I've had this play, Columbus the Man, in my desk drawer for 14 terms now. Just waiting for a child like your Charles to walk through those doors. Someone who could play Columbus in Columbus the Man. I'm sorry to hear that he's weak and sickly and on beef broth. But Mrs. Reilly, your son is very talented. Mrs. Reilly, he is very talented. So please see within yourself and allow him to have this experience with his classmates. And let him put on Columbus the Man. He doesn't have the colorings of the manliness of Columbus. But Mrs. Reilly, I shouldn't tell you this, but in all my years of teaching in the Bronx, I have to tell you that I believe that Charles is the only true actor as young as he is, that's ever sat in one of my classes. Mrs. Reilly, your son is very talented. Wow. My mother didn't know to shit or go blind. That's an old French theater term. So it is. And this move prop. Mr. Di Benedetti taught me how to stand an egg on end for the last scene of the show to prove the world was round. And she told my mother it has to be hard-boiled. And then she taught me how to do it. It was going to be a wonderful show because we practiced twice a day in the gymnasium, the choreography, to show that the Pinto never stopped moving on the ocean. Now you can be weak, sickly, and on beef broth and do this shit just so long. And then our school janitor, I wish you could meet him, Otto, played by Wolfgang Puck. We got him. And he put up a big ladder with a wash basket on top of the crow's nest. Well, he did. And then Misty Benedetti put some sheets and put a big fan so the sails flew out over the audience. You got chills in rehearsal. It was unbelievable. It was just so beautiful. And then my boatswain had the first lines when we saw land. My boatswain was played by Fritzy Seligman from down on Webster Avenue. And he said the lines through Dr. Hepner's braces. He said, Columbus! Columbus! Land ho! There it is! I had a beautiful supporting cast. I said, you see, men, I was right, we didn't fall off the edge. Like the world said we would. The world is indeed round, and Columbus will prove it. This will prove that the world is indeed round. Well, there was applause. You wouldn't believe that. I couldn't believe the applause. There were a lot of grandmas there. And then the curtains of the auditorium closed, and when they opened, it was my first spotlight. And look, Missy Benedetti was working it herself because she was too afraid to give the responsibility to anybody else. The spotlight was right on me, and there was such applause I couldn't believe it. You should have seen my costume to the floor black crepe paper. And my mother made two. You should have seen it. And my mother made two silver crepe paper stripes for swords. And I remember when Missy Benedetti drew the costume for my mother to design. She said, you better make two in case he wets himself. I'm not going to wet myself. I'm too busy bowing. And as I was bowing, the voice in my head said, you're awfully good in this. This little 9-year-old egomaniacal shit already is an actor. You're awfully good in this. I sounded like Meryl Streep watching the rushes of Sophie's Choice. And that day, back to the plot. And that day, on the second floor, PS 53 between Finley and Heller Avenue, in Misty Benedetti's spotlight, an actor, well, sort of one, an actor was born. Something marvelous happened for my father in the beginning of the 30s. Unbelievable. I used to love to go to a studio in the Paramount building. It smelled so of India ink. It was so beautiful. They had big tables, and my daddy designed these posters for the outdoor displays of the forthcoming movies, and there was Ida Lupino. Wow. And Barbara Stanwyck, and Anime Wong. Daddy Anime Wong's hair is terrific. But my favorite was, look, Marlene Dietrich in a movie called The Scarlet Empress. And she sat on a horse, and she had a fur coat with a fur cape and a fur hat. Daddy said fur is the hardest thing to draw. And she had these big feathers that came out of her hat. It was so beautiful. And this stranger, this man, came to visit my father. He had an appointment at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Daddy said. And he said he was a lovely man with a little mustache. And he had a very good suit, and he spoke so well, Daddy said. The stranger will be played by Kevin Spacey. Well, he's in everything else. And this is what the stranger said to my father, Mr. Reilly. This work is extraordinary. It's beautiful. I've worked in black and white for the past few years, but now I'm going to use color. And I'm going to go to California and start a new section of my business. And there's no one in California that can do this. Mr. Reilly, you are the finest watercolorist in advertising. And I am here to ask you to come to California with me as my partner. I have plans, I have dreams. And I'd be honored if we could work together, because there's no one in California, Mr. Reilly, that can do that. So see if you can move your family and join me in California. It would make me very happy, sir. We were going to go from the Bronx to California. So my father went home to tell my mother that there was a chance we could go to California. What are we, pioneers? Isn't she a doll? What are we, panhandlers? I'm not going to California. My mother and father are in the East. My roots are in the East. My sister and brother were staying here. We're not going to California. So you've got big ideas. You've always had big ideas. Don't you know we'll never have anything anyway? We'll never have anything, so forget it. We're not going to California. The man that begged my father to go to California was Walt Disney. Well, it's that kind of play. What did you think, you're all going to be game shows? I can still hear my mother screaming, who's going to listen to a mouse that talks? Nobody knows. Except the whole world. Emily Dickinson once wrote to a friend, I live in the state of Massachusetts, but my sister Lavinia lives in the state of regret. And when my father didn't have the courage to take that chance and make that turn, he too began to live in the state of regret. And at the end of that decade, 1938-39, they stopped using airbrush watercolor for outdoor display purposes, and they went to the photo, which is still used today. And my father's work diminished. A few months later, there was no need for him to go to Paramount. He told me years later he can still hear the razor blade scraping the gold letters off his office. He began to fall further and further into the state of regret and drank very heavily. You see, the few years after the Depression were very hard on everybody in New York. And my father had what everybody else seemed to have, a nervous breakdown. And he had to be institutionalized. And that took all the money. My mother and I had to move out of the 3-room apartment on Clay Avenue in the Bronx and put everything in Shermer's warehouse. In those days after the Depression, every road led to Shermer's warehouse. That's where you put your old life and you hope to try to find some new one. We got on the train at 125th Street, New York, New Haven, Hartford Railroad, because that's the nearest station to the Bronx. My mother sat with a broken begonia plant on her lap all the way and cried with the wheels of the train, what's going to happen to us, 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 what's going to happen to us. The plant was all broken. It's very hard to grow anything in the Bronx. The voice in my head said, it's going to be all right. The voice in my head always said, it's going to be all right. I said, Ma, it's going to be all right, honest. But she would have nothing of that, and she cried all the way. We got to Hartford and took a 65-cent yellow cab ride to our new home with her family. 18 Enfield Street, a 2.5-room apartment with no heat and no hot water. And there were to be 7 of us under that roof. My Aunt Lillian. Oh, I wish you could have met her. She was so beautiful. Aunt Lily used to live in New York, but she was living now with her parents. She lived in New York in a beautiful hotel suite because she was superintendent of nurses at the Jewish Memorial Hospital. And everyone loved Aunt Lil. She would be played by Claire Trevor. And one day she was walking in the hospital and she was limping, only slightly. And the doctor said, Miss Nelson, you seem to be favoring a hip. She said, yes, doctor, I'm in terrible pain. When I was 8 years old, I fell through the ice in a skating accident in New Britain, Connecticut, and the doctor said there was nothing they could do. And over the years, it's been getting worse. It's now, doctor, I can't sleep from the excruciating pain. I just sit up and smoke. I smoke all night. I can't work. I can't move the patients in the bed. I can't lift them up to feed them. I can't. I don't know what I'm going to do. Doctor, it hurts. It hurts so bad. The doctor said, Miss Nelson, there's a new operation. A new operation that can take away the pain. You won't know you have it. Lil, you have been the greatest nurse here at Jewish Memorial Hospital. Everybody loves you. You'll get the best of care. It won't cost anything. There is a new operation, Lil. We can take away the pain. And my aunt volunteered for one of the first lobotomies. Oh, it's that kind of play. And it didn't work. And my beautiful aunt lost her. She had such beautiful blonde hair. And my aunt lost her mind. Mommy. Mommy, what happened to Lily's hair? Save it for the stage, I told you. Also under that roof was Bert. That's my Uncle Benny. Bert in Swedish, handsome with good suits, played by Burt Lancaster. And when he walked down that street, boy, you knew he was something. And every night he'd look in the paper and go out. He was handsome, Uncle Benny. But he didn't look in the paper to see what movie was playing. Or if there was a nightclub attraction in the area, he was looking for something else. Because every night he went out and sat in all the funeral parlors in Hartford, among the dead. People he didn't even know. He read there was a body at 6 o'clock at Taylor Modine's. Then he could skip across town to Johnson & Johnson's because they had to wake at 7. But the big night was at Weinstein's because they had 2 family sittings. My Uncle Benny was the only one in the family to have an active social life. Then there was my grandparents from the old country. Peter and Emma. Peter was a tailor, great. Used to work in the Sage Allen building on Main Street in Hartford, and he taught me how to make my first puppets, my grandpapa Pear. Peter, in Swedish is Pear. And my grandparents will be played by Liv Ullmann and Max von Sydow. And every night for years, we ate fish sticks. Because Birdseye just came on into view and you could get 20 for 19 cents and coleslaw was cheap as hell, 5 cents a pound. Every night fish stick. You'd be surprised how important tartar sauce can become. But my grandparents were from the old country, so they wouldn't have fish sticks. Every night they ate these big pieces of herring that smelled so awful because we had no refrigerator. Wow. I mean, these things did go on later. And by 6 o'clock there was no ice in the icebox, so the fish smelled. And they would take the bones out of their mouth and then throw them across the kitchen floor into the toilet bowl. Every They take out the bones and throw them across the kitchen floor into the toilet bowl. And never miss. So there we were at dinner. I sat between my comatose father, my lobotomized aunt, my uncle eating fast to get to the dead. Eugene O'Neill would never even touch this man. And my mother making new friends out the window. You guinea wop bastards, you leave that kettle of Pollock! Pollock bastards, get away from my kid! My mother didn't go over very well in Connecticut either. But there we were every night. And everybody spoke Swedish. Mamma mia, passa la shittaboo. Mamma mia, shittaboo. Call a friend, look on the internet, call the Swedish embassy. Shittaboo means meatball. Mamma mia, passa la fiskastug. It's like a beautiful Romance language, isn't it? Fiskastugen means fish stick. Every night. I spent my adolescence in an Ingmar Bergman movie. But this nightly smorgasbord wasn't the worst of it. Not at all. What the neighbors said about me. Can you see those two out in the back near Magnolia Street hanging wash? It's Mrs. Baggish. Mrs. Pantano. Mrs. Baggish, played by Olympia Dukakis. Was talking to Mrs. Pantano, played by Gina Lollobrigida. And she said, Stella, put down the stockings. Stella, put them down. Put down the stockings and come over here. I want to. Stella, put the stockings down. I want to talk to you. Don't you think Mrs. Reilly's son is odd? Well, that's not so bad. But how do you think I felt being the odd one in a family like that? But don't despair, my beloved post-Labor Day audience. Because this play, this beautifully multi-layered play, has a happy ending. Because decades later in my posh Beverly Hills home, I read in the Los Angeles Times that LA was having gas rationing. According to license plate number, you were either odd or you were even. I ran down to my Mobile station on the corner where for 35 years they thought I was Harvey Korman. Say hello to Carol! I will! I rolled down the window of my very expensive Mercedes, and the Mobile attendant, played by Eli Wallach, said, "Are you on or even?" I said, "You'll never believe this story, it's so beautiful. All my life, I've been odd, but I'm even now. Fill it up!" The staging's breathtaking, isn't it? I go from there to there to here. And later I'll go to there to there to here. Fosse would be so envious. I'm so charming I forget where I am. About this time I began to meet my lifelong friends. Friends that I've had for over 60 years. All three of them saw the play. One as recent as a week ago, Sunday. He came from Bloomfield, Connecticut with his wife, Roberta. I'm a Capricorn. We're very loyal to everything. We have the same phone number, the same car, the same restaurant. We order the same thing. We're very odd, Capricorn. But what we find, we believe in. And these three friends, the first was Paul Tresky. Paul Tresky and I were at every school play together. Vine Street, Jones Junior High School, way back to elementary school, and even up to college one year. And Weaver High, where we were in plays with a little funny girl named Toadie Fields. Directed by a man named, God knows what happened to him, Norman Lear. That's Weaver High School. And I can tell you that in my 50 years of being a director and working with the greatest artists in the theater, which I truly have, and when I was young I saw the greatest, I can tell you that Paul Tresky was the worst actor that words cannot describe it. Putrid gets near him. You must believe me, I was there. But he loved it so. And he got the parts because he wasn't fat. He was like Len like a Lotka, and he had a lower voice so he could play the policeman and the fathers and the rabbi. That's how he got all the parts. He might have gotten the part, but what he did with it on the stage was unbelievable. But the best part about Paul was, here she goes to work. His mother, say you're Mrs. Kate Tresky. A little widow in a two-piece suit that Paul said she knitted herself. And she had a little felt hat that was on the side of her head. And when that tiny woman walked down Enfield Street, boy, you knew she was something. Look at her. She was so regal and elegant and proud. You knew she was something. No, she didn't belong in Hart. Hi, Miss Tresky, it's Charles! Paul's friend. She owned a local movie house. Paul and I could get in for nothing! Well, it's 6 cents in the afternoon and 11 cents at night. And once, I was sitting in her office, my first theatrical office. Right behind the cashier's cage, can you see it? And Paul was out in the lobby getting juju beads and milk duds. And I was alone with this elegant woman. Her little felt hat and purse were on the chair. And in her two-piece suit she sat behind the desk, Mrs. Tresky. She was a lovely woman. She sat in front of this big poster of Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney and one of the Hardy Boys series. And she said to me, Charles, you're going to be an actor. I can tell. Not Paul. Paul loves it, but he doesn't have it. He doesn't have it, you have it. I see when he brings you to the house how you listen to my classical records. I see what your eyes say. I know as my name is Kate Tresky, I'll live to see you on Broadway. Now, I'm telling you what I'm telling you. I'm telling you. My name is Kate Tresky. I'll see you on Broadway. Don't say to Paul. Because Paul loves it, but he doesn't have it. Here he comes. The voice in my head said I had something around flesh and blood, didn't I? I was going to be an actor. And what Mrs. Tresky said, you believe because she was something else. You see, what Mrs. Tresky was a dream dropper. She dropped a dream into the open mind of a child. And every once in a while a dream, look, it grows flesh. And a dream does stand tall. And a dream does walk. Every once in a while. A dream. Thank you, Mrs. Tresky. A dream does happen. Every once in a while. It does. Can you smell the rye bread? That's from the Baggish Bakery on Albany Avenue. I know the owner, son, Donald Baggish. And I must be his best friend because he had 2 tickets to Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus for that afternoon! And he asked me to go. The circus was playing Hartford, and it was July 6, 1944. And I ran home and I said, Ma, Donald you can't go to the circus. Isn't she sweet? You can't go to the circus this afternoon. You're going to the circus tonight with your father. You can't go to the circus twice in one day. So I went anyway. And Donald and I crept up Enfield Street. I could still hear the screen door slam when my mother caught us and she screamed from the porch, I hope it burns to the ground! Goodbye, Mom! Oh no, Donald, once you get to know her, you'll like her. Oh, honest, she makes great chocolate pudding. And we went up to Barber Street. That's where the tent was pitched. And we turned it into the meadow, and for the first time I saw, Donald, look! The big top! There's 3 poles with yellow. And red flags. And 9,000 people. July 6, 1944. The sawdust. It smelled so good. Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. Donald, look. The greatest show on earth. Donald's tickets were the cheap ones. We didn't care! And seats. We could sit on this side of the entrance in the bleachers or on the other side. We didn't know where to sit! But the bleachers were higher on that side of the entrance. So we ran over, look, and we climbed to the very top bleacher. It was like Chloe's Paradise all over again. The music was beautiful, and the first act was the wild animals. Look, Donald, the tigers and lions! And I could still hear the crack of the whip against the sawdust, and how those big cats jumped back on their huge red lacquered stools. And then there was a hush through the tent, because the next act was the greatest act in the history of the circus, and no one else was allowed to be in any of the 3 rings or under the tent itself while the flying Wallendas performed. They came out in yellow They were so beautiful. And look, Donald! They climbed the rope ladder's way to the top. You could hardly see it so far! And they were going to walk across the wires over the 3 rings. And there was no net. And they were going to balance themselves with poles and chairs. And they were going to be riding on bicycles. They looked so beautiful in yellow costume. Look, Donald. And just as the acrobat put her foot on the wire, Donald said, "Fire!" And we looked over where we almost sat in the bleachers, and there was this big ball of red flame, like a color orange. It was so beautiful. And it was passing through the people where we almost sat. And then the acrobats were falling down like broken canaries and bouncing off the sawdust. And the voice in my head said, "Jump! Donald, jump!" And we jumped and went into the tent and ran to the edge of the lot and turned around, and it was gone. The tent is gone, Donald! Look, it's gone! The tent is gone! There was no screaming. And there were the 3 black poles. And no more little red and yellow flags. Can you hear that? That's the band. They're in their red uniforms with the gold. There they are. They're by the dead giraffes. And they're playing the Stars and Stripes Forever, because that's what the band played whenever there was an emergency under the big top to warn everyone. They played the Stars and Stripes. A little girl went by, and she had no face. It was burned off. And she was screaming, "My mommy's going to kill me, my mommy's going to kill me." Why would her mother want to kill her? Put her out of her dress is smoldering. Put her dress on, it's smoldering. Someone put her dress. The fire started the night before, when a roustabout put a cigarette out in the sawdust and it burned up a hemp rope. And the moment the beautiful acrobat in yellow put her foot on the wire, there was the explosion. 168 people were killed. The same amount as in the Oklahoma City bombing, only that bomb was in the shape of a yellow rider truck. Our bomb was in the shape of a big top. This is the supplement the Hartford Courant put out in 1994. At the 50th anniversary of the fire. There's my picture. They interviewed the survivors. There was the explosion. And on the cover is the great Emmett Kelly, the great clown, carrying a bucket of water to put out an explosion. And this is what the paper said. The tent did not collapse. It evaporated. Its roof had been waterproofed with a mixture of 6,000 gallons of gasoline and 1,800 pounds of paraffin, a formula that had been used for years. The sweet darling Ringling Brothers Barnum and their friend Bailey chose to waterproof the tent rather than to protect the patrons. That way, if it rained, they wouldn't have to return the money. You're not allowed to wear the color yellow in a circus act. I think I told you 168 people were killed in the Connecticut catastrophe, they called it. The catastrophe that Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey pushed under the sawdust, so most likely none of you have ever heard of it. Donald Baggish never said what my mother yelled from the porch. Since the fire and until I saw him a week ago Sunday. Donald Baggish was a good friend. My mother never went on the porch again. She didn't go out for weeks because she was afraid she'd be like New York, followed by a bunch of women screaming, "You witch," from the second floor. She never yelled out of a window either. Thank God. I didn't think it affected me. Isn't that funny? It was all so fast. It was all so quiet. 57 years ago. Until the next couple of days, I went into my favorite place, Mrs. Tresky's Theater. And I screamed, "Paul, I can't sit here!" And I ran out on Albany Avenue, "Paul, I can't go in there!" You see, the sound of the audience before the movie was the same as the sound of the audience before the explosion. The last motion picture house I was in was over 60 years ago, was the Lenox, Mrs. Tresky's movie house. I'm never a member of an audience. I never go to a show. I go to New York for 8 or 9 days and I sit in my favorite place since 1947, Sardi's. And I see all my friends. If I have pupils in important plays, I watch from the back or from the side. I coach very famous opera singers from the side. I can't be what you are. I can't buy a ticket, say hello in the lobby, and come down and sit in E104 or L202. And the way motion picture prices have escalated in the last 6 decades, I have saved a fortune. But that's how it affected me. And when you read this book, the supplement from the Times, from the Current, other people that were become deans of colleges and heads of schools have in their contracts that they will not go to assembly. So that's how it affected us. Other people can't hear a siren, they lay on the street. Others can't go into a home with a fireplace. Ah, Lord, look below it, I had a book of matches. That's how it affected me. When my mother and father got together that night, my father was so happy when he saw the black sky over Hartford and he knew his son was not there. And when he found out that I was there, my mother and father had the worst fight I ever heard. Worse than the one the night before. And the ones all last week. They never hit each other, they just verbally attacked one another. Their words were so deadly, I thought, why don't they use guns? Unbelievable. I wish I had my friend Alex Cecilia's wire recorder so I could put it by the door and play it for my friends. These are my parents. Listen, it's my father. Does your parents talk this way? Please tell me they do. Is this how all parents are? Isn't that amazing? Those are my parents. Are all parents that way? At night I would lay in a little bed and I would make believe it was a boat. And I would go away. I told you a little while ago when this epic started. That I have an extraordinary life. I do because I know some of the greatest comedic minds in the world. People who are God-given humor comes from their pores. I know them, they're my friends. Jonathan Winters, can you imagine? You go out to dinner with him and there's a little basket of rolls with a white napkin and one roll sticking out. And he picks it up. He says, "This is my granddaughter, little Susie Ann." Isn't she adorable? And you're there 10 minutes with the great-granddaughter. He calls up and leaves messages, Jonathan Winters. Alice Ghostly has almost enough to make a CD. You come home, and you hear the message. "Hello, Charles, it's Jonathan. How do we get rid of Pat Sajak?" Jerry Stiller, who dedicated his book to me. Jerry Stiller lived with his father and mother and his sister and a brother in a twin bed close to the coast. Evidently, twin bed means something to this woman. I shall continue. Thank you. They were all in one twin bed by the coal stove because there was no heat or hot water. And there was no bread. The bread and milk were the things. You didn't go for, foie de gras in those days. Just bread, iced or milk. But there was a ray of hope that went through that awful apartment once a week when Eddie Cantor came on the radio. And Jerry said, I'm going to be him one day because laughter takes away from chaos. I met my Italian family in the form 51 years ago of a little Italian boy who was a bartender and so cute. He was so thin and tiny. Dom DeLuise. His father was a garbage man. Can you believe in Brooklyn? And he would bring home pieces of garbage that he thought might have some worth. And once when Dom was very young, his father came home with a piece of garbage. Oh, God. Pa, what are you going to do with half a typewriter? I always thought that line should be in a play. Oh, he said, that's not so bad. A half a typewriter if you have one hand. Walter Matthau had to bring up his brothers and sisters because his father left at 12. Nancy Walker, Neil Simon, funny people, really funny people. Had chaotic childhoods, filled with pain and chaos, but we had to laugh, because that was the way out! It's the only way out. It was a rebellion. We're going to laugh anyway. Mark Twain said the greatest weapon mankind has is laughter. And I was about to find that out when my friend Dr. Alan J. Schwartz, the noted psychiatrist with offices in Westport and Park Avenue. But 60 years ago he was Schwartzy, my friend. He lent me a blue suit and he got me a job as an usher in the Bushel Memorial Hall in Hartford. And I started in the second balcony. I lied. I said I was 15. I was tall. I was 13. And I became an usher. Second balcony on the left aisle. And I heard something the first night there in that auditorium. Oh my God, I don't believe this. I heard 3,200 people laugh at the same time. There's not a hell of a lot of laughter in an Ingmar Bergman movie. And I looked down on the stage and there were unbelievable things on the stage. My God, there was Bobby Clark and Beatrice Lilly, the funniest man and woman I ever saw, and Olsen and Johnson and Fanny Price and Bert Lahr and Sophie Tucker and Eddie Cantor and Groucho Marx and Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy and a young Julie Harris and a play Sundown Beach and such a funny woman, Miss Shirley Booth. And I looked at these people. And then the usher's favorite came. Every season, she was so famous because she was a big movie star. Not only that, she wrote the plays herself that were from Broadway that she played in. And the ushers loved her the best because she was filthy. And then you knew Mae West was in town. In Diamond Lily, was a big nude picture of her. It took the whole back of the stage. She was like this. No clothes on a chaise longue. It's a hard word for a 13-year-old usher. She was like this on a chaise longue. And when she came down the stairs, the actor said, Diamond Lil, how do you like the new painting? And she said, oh, it's beautiful, but take down the free lunch sign. favorite. I had the honor of knowing her for the last 30 years of her life. She was a good friend. It was such an honor to know Mae West. She would call me up, and it would take her 5 minutes to figure out who she was talking to. Because she never dialed the phone. Her sister dialed the phone because she didn't want to break a nail. So by the time her sister dialed the phone, she was talking to somebody. She gets on the phone. Who is it? You called me, dear. Jesus. She always did that. She moved all the time. She never held her hands here, but here, to be thinner. And the mouth never stopped. She took a liking, that's how I met her, to a lifelong friend of mine who just started her nightclub act in Beverly Hills at a little club. It was so long ago that Joan Rivers' hair was black. 40 years ago. And Joan called me and said, you gotta come, Mae West comes every night, she believes in me. You gotta come meet her. So I went to your little club, and she was all in white. But I didn't notice her because she was sitting on her side to me. And then Joan Rivers says, you know Mae, don't you? Like she's some hash slinger in a diner. Mae West! I said, Miss West, you're the greatest. I used to usher for you at the Bushel Memorial. Oh! Hartford! What a hot town! Obviously she knew something that I didn't. She called me up to invite me to one of the greatest evenings I've spent in my life. Her 75th birthday. It was at UCLA. UCLA, and Edward G. Robinson was the MC. And they had the Army, the Navy, the Marine, and the Coast Guard bands. And thousands of servicemen. And they marched in with flags. And the bands were unbelievable. It took your breath away. Why? Because inside every United States issued life preserver to the armed forces are two words stenciled: Mae West. Because it's like a corset. And you look her up in the dictionary. Benjamin Franklin ain't in the dictionary. Neither is Eleanor Roosevelt, but you look up Mae West, it says noun, flotation garment. She's also a parachute. She's also a parachute. It's two small chutes that says Mae West. When it lands, it looks like a brassiere. That's why all the servicemen were there. And when it was over, she said, boy, it was so beautiful. You made me feel like a million. But I'll take you two at a time. 75 years old. She walked in front of a Marine. Their band was first. And she looked at the crotch of every single one. She got to one at the end and she's like, oh, you're new here. John DeLuise's baby was sleeping in her arms in her dressing room. And she said this after about an hour. This kid doesn't know what he's missing. The biggest tribute came at the end of the evening, and it was unbelievably funny. About 60, 70 Campfire Girls of America marched out, and they made a big, like a circle around a bonfire. 70, 80 of them from all over the country. And they carried this big plaque that said, Mae West, Campfire Girl of the Year. And they sat all around her, and she was in the middle as a flame. Now in those days she wore a white brocaded coat to the floor. She looked like a Frigidaire. So they sang the Campfire Girl song. And after they sang the Campfire Girl song, she said, girls, I have to tell you this is a highlight of the evening. I am very touched, girls. You sang beautifully the Campfire Girl song. I've always regretted I was never cold enough to join your organization. I had an extraordinary life. Those kind of laughs were reserved for one of the greatest artists that ever came to the Bushnell. Every year she came, you couldn't get a ticket. When the little Jewish woman named Molly Pecan came with the Yiddish theater. Oh my goodness. How they screamed. She taught me that laughter was the same in every language. This little woman who ran up the proscenium. She had a straight woman, tall, Henrietta Jacobson. Why? 60 years later, do I remember an actress no one ever heard of, Henrietta Jacobson, because she was funny. She was tall, the other one was short, and the audience screamed. I thought the walls would come down. And the voice in my head said, I have to learn how to do that. I have to learn how they do that. How can you make people laugh? 3,200 people at a time, and maybe they'll forget what the doctor said yesterday. Maybe they'll forget they lost their mother, or that their brother was very sick in intensive care. I gotta find out. I have nothing else to do with my life. I gotta find out how people make people laugh. So I'm gonna go and be an actor like Mrs. Tresky said. Now in those days, if you were handsome and beautiful, you went to California, to Hollywood. If you weren't, you went to New York. I had such a dilemma. I went to New York. Now we didn't have money to study. Those fakaka expensive schools like the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and the Neighborhood Playhouse with Sanford Meisner, they wanted 2 years in advance. We had $10, $20 at most. But there was a new school opening up. A friend saw it in the paper. A new school, HB Studio. Let's not have a rally, please. It's almost intermission. I want nurses in attendance here. Budget cannot afford it. Thank you for applauding. I love you. Anyway, back to the plot. See how quickly an old actor can remember where we are? Sometimes I forget what act I'm in. Sometimes I have to laugh. The show is so funny. It really is. HB Studio in the Village. It was run by a great German director and actor, Herbert Berghoff, played by Otto Preminger. And his wife, wow, 27 years old, and she just won a second Tony for St. Joan, Uta Hagen. The part of Uta Hagen will be played by Uta Hagen. And it's $3. And we went down to the Village on 6th Avenue on 23rd Street, and the building was condemned. Well, they were still there, but there was no locks in the doors. And there were some steps missing. It was hard to get up. And the door frame slanted. and the floor slanted, and they had the second and third loft, and there was a lovely registrar, Pippa Hastings, played by Maureen Stapleton. If you didn't have the $3, she said, go in anyway. It's okay. Yeah, it's all right. Come on. Go in anyway. Come on, dear. You coming? Come in anyway, please. So we all went in anyway. And all the new students were put in a class called the Beginners of Miss Hogan. And that was at 11 o'clock on Tuesday. This is 51 years ago. 51 years ago now. School started in September. 51 years ago. 51 years ago. And Miss Hogan greeted the class, and she read the roll. Mason Adams, please. Jack Albertson, Barbara Barry, Orson Bean, Shelley Berman, Peggy Cass, please. Robert Culp, Wyatt Cooper, Charles Grodin, David Hedison, Bill Hickey, Hal Holbrook, please. Frank Langella, Jack Lemon, Bambi Lynn, Steve McQueen, Ann Mira, Jules Munchin, Geraldine Page, Charles Nelson. Here is Hagen, Charles Nelson Reilly, Jason Robards, Jerry Stiller. Jerry, don't stand in the back. There's a seat next to Ann Mira. Annie, raise your hand. Jerry Stiller, Tom True, and Fritz Weaver. These were my classmates. This is my Christmas card list. These are our closest friends, all of us together now, because we shared the most important time. That time is called the beginning. We had three things in common. We wanted to go on stage. Can you imagine? We had no money, and all of us, this distinguished list of great artists, all of us, 51 years ago, couldn't act for shit. I was there! You wouldn't believe it! Well, the one name you haven't probably recognized is Wyatt Cooper. Wyatt Cooper was a comedian, tall and thin like Dick Van Dyke. He was adorable. And everybody wanted to do a scene with Wyatt. But one day he didn't come. Then he didn't come for a few weeks. Why, you didn't miss Miss Hagen's class? The price was right. And it was the most important thing to do with 4 or 5 hours a week, is to sit with Miss Hagen. And then we got information that Wyatt had a girlfriend and fell madly in love. And a few weeks later we got these gorgeous invitations to the wedding. And we always were happy because we could go eat then. That meant we could eat something. And we all went to the wedding, and it was the most beautiful wedding I've ever been to in my life. Because Wyatt married Gloria Vanderbilt. So Wyatt didn't have to be an actor. I had two beautiful boys. We knew the woman behind the desk held the key to what a craft we had to learn. Because every time she opened her mouth, we grew. And this class, forget Yale, forget those highfalutin colleges with their emblems. This group supported one another, loved one another, and we took such pride. And over the years, we got better. I sat next to Hal Holbrook 51 years ago. I love Hal Holbrook. His wife will be played by Dixie Carter. I don't have time, but what a broad that is. What a class act! So anyway, I had the honor to direct Hal Holbrook in the television series Evening Shade with those great actors. My friend Mr. Reynolds gave me to Charles, Burt Reynolds, and he was in Evening Shade. He played Burt's father-in-law. And one day he came to class with a bag, a paper bag, and I looked in it, and the other kids wondered what. And it looked like a mop, but it wasn't a mop. It was a $2 wig and a $5 coat, like with a broad collar. I mean, so I said, "How? What's that?" And he said, "That's my Mark Twain costume. I get $25 for doing it in school." Well, the whole class got hysterical. Geraldine Page saw the white wig and thought it was George Washington. It's Mark Twain. I mean, that must be just shitty, isn't it? He had such a fake voice. See, he and Fritz Weaver had problems when they started. They have these fake voices. So when the phone rang in a modern play, they would say, "Hello." And Miss Hagen would say, "Just say hello." He's a great teacher. Just say hello. Hello. He's still doing it! 51 years later. But now he travels with a big truck that's stenciled on it, not Mae West, but Mark Twain tonight. And a year ago I was with my black sister who I spoke to today on the phone. I love her so, Miss Ruby D. I directed her in her wonderful play that's in its third year now, called My One Good Nerve. She is such a wonderful artist, makes me go crazy. We have so much fun. And Ruby and I were at the Black Film Theater Festival in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Hal Kamen was at the same posh hotel because he was at the Appalachian Theater Festival doing Mark Twain. So we're on the elevator together. And he says to me, "You mean you haven't seen it yet?" I said, "No, Al, I haven't seen it yet. I'll see it when you get it right." I told him plenty. So my pupils, at 51 years ago with the crummy $2 wig and the $5 coat, with the holes in it, there was also the Tony, the Emmy, and the Grammy. And the first Broadway show on video and the first Broadway show issued on DVD. And in the 51 years also in the bag accumulated $50 to $60 million. They live in such a large house. I tell my pupils, if you want to get ahead, have a dream. Put something in the bag. The only helping hand is on the end of your own arm. Don't look to a man in a desk or an agent in a tower. Get a paper bag! It's really quite simple. Put something in it, and boy, could you be surprised? We are now going into, thank God, the last scene of the first act. When people get upset at the length of my beautiful play, I call their attention like the one man last night, if he looked at his watch once more, I was going to throw this down at him. There's a production in Germany now of Faust, the great Goethe's Faust. It is 21 hours long. It's right here if anyone wants to read it in intermission. 21 fucking hours! And they sold out the tickets immediately. They didn't have nothing else to do there. My play is as short as a Carol Burnett sketch compared to 21 hours. I know it's the last scene because my pill is wearing off. When school was out, we went to summer stock. Thank you, Madam. Have a nice long intermission in a few minutes. Because the second act, no, it's not that long. I have to do this tomorrow again. You went to summer stock. Now, summer stock didn't exist where we are in the West. It was only in the East. There were 500, 600, 700 theaters all over in June to September in the New England states and in Pennsylvania, New York. It was called the Straw Hat Circuit. And you could see Claude Rains and Ralph Bellamy and Basil Rathbone and Ruth Gordon. And you could see these extraordinarily talented people. And you could learn from them, and you could go get a job. You wouldn't get paid, but you could pay to see me and have a walk-on. And if they liked you, they asked you back next season. And you got paid, and you got your equity card. I made my debut in Newport Casino. That was the name of the theater, part of that gorgeous complex with the tennis. Newport Casino in 1950, I was in a play called Post Road with a woman who knew how to handle an audience where laughter was concerned. I first learned from Miss Zazu Pitts. Oh, she was something. But my favorite place was Kansas City Starlight Theater, because it was a dream dropper that ran. Our first male dream dropper, whose name was Richard Hilberger. He was a famous motion picture. God bless you. He was the first. In the summer, he ran the Starlight Theater. And he's the first male dream dropper in my story. Richard Hilberger. The Starlight Theater was 24,000 people. Wow. Well, it's that kind of show. It's a wow show. Not long enough I had to repeat the goddamn line. 24,000 people. And you never knew what Mr. Berger looked like, although he was handsome, like Howard, the musical comedy star. Howard
Keel.
That's what I said. I'll be over in a minute. The pill is now doing it. Howard Keel, he was beautiful, but you didn't know he was such a class act, Richard Berger. But you never knew what he looked like. Because he did this all day. You see, the Kansas City Starlight Theater is outdoors. And he was looking for black clouds. Because if it rained, you didn't want to return 24,000 people's money. But there was a law on the Missouri books that Mr. Berger made sure was there. Everyone loved him. You didn't have to give the money back if you got to intermission. You get it? And I was there 10 years and hundreds of productions with great artists of the stage, unbelievable time. And we always got to intermission. Through hurricanes, tornadoes, and what? You wouldn't believe the hailstorm and the thunder and the lightning. Because Mr. Berger was in the wings saying, keep going! Keep going! Soaking wet. It was 126 degrees under the lights. And mostly you were in woolen costumes. And the theater played 7 nights a week, so they could never send out the costumes to be cleaned. Oh. Well, that's the kind of show it is. You watched all game shows, didn't you? I was in a show with a great brewer. I still see her. We go for dinner. Anna Maria Alberghetti. And she's still beautiful. We were in Firefly, and the next show that was going to have a dress rehearsal in 10 minutes was The New Moon. Sigmund Romberg's The New Moon, starring Earl Wrightson, one of the great radio singers of all time. And the sets, you could see the sets, these big ships. It was going to be beautiful. The New Moon. There was a rumor going around the theater that the second male lead, George Church, who was going to play the swashbuckling Captain Georges Duval was taken ill and rushed to a Kansas City hospital with a ruptured appendix. I knew I'd play that part! And just then, Tony Ferrara, our little stage manager, came running, played by a shorter Danny DeVito. He came to my dressing room and said, "Go to Mr. Berger right away, it's an emergency." I told you I'd play that part. I'm going to play Captain Georges Duval, Captain of the New Moon. I went to Mr. Berger's office over the dressing room. I must remember to tell him that I played Columbus. Now Mr. Berger was very nervous, because not only was George Church a very dear friend, personal friend, but an operation like a ruptured appendix was dangerous 50 years ago. And besides that, all day, there were heavy tornado warnings. So I knocked at Mr. Berger's office and went in. 10 minutes to go to the dress rehearsal, and no Captain Georges Duval.
You wanted to see me, Dick?
Mr. Berger looked at me and said, "Who are you?" Charles, do you think you could be more? Is there any way possibly could you be less? Richard Berger was an actor's best friend. When we were young, he loved me. He was my friend till he passed away at 94. He always called me to take me to the country club, Cologne. The class act was Richard Hilberger. He didn't want to hurt my feelings, but he needed the captain of the New Moon informed in it. Finally, he found the words that wouldn't hurt me. He said, "Charles, can you be more brave?" I said, "Mr. Berger!" It's between me and Anna Maria Alberghetti. And I'm taller. So I got to play the part of Captain Georges Duval. And it was so terrific because I had these great boots and swords and epaulets. And I came out on that deck and I threw the leading man, Earl Wrightson, into chains, and I had lines like this: "Take it below!" Oh, and it hurt to talk that way. But I had beautiful songs. I had to learn them overnight. I was so nervous. Oh, I couldn't get the key. I was so scared. A maestro again, please. Thank you. Now, Mr. Berger said to look into the light.
Marianne, I want to love you. I repeat it every day, dear. Marianne, I want to love you.
It's a simple thing to say. And that I had lace sleeves, and I had a silken jabot. A jabot, look it up. A jabot. And I threw it down on the deck. I threw it down on the deck. Because she was mine. Because I was Captain Georges Duval. Douglas Fairbanks would have shit if he saw this. And then she sang the last line of the first act. "Lover, come back to..." And on me, the curtains were supposed to come close on the railroad track, but they blew off, and the tornado came over the back of the theater and blew her off the stage, man! Oh my God! Couldn't believe it! And Mr. Berger was in the wings. Keep going! Keep going! And it's Captain Georges Duval. I looked right into the eye of the storm and said, "Holy shit!" to give up his life to marry you, Mary. Then I knock him dead with a high note. Don't clap. Don't ever clap for anything like that. Mr. Berger gave me $1,000 bonus. But the thing I have in my home now, almost 50 years later, is what he gave me also, which was this beautiful blue velvet-lined shadow box. Deep, rich wood. And inside it is a gold and silver sword that is so beautiful, the handle and the artwork on it and the tassel. And it has a brass little plaque under it with just one word on it. And the word is brave. With 3 question marks. I mean, is that a friend or what? Mr. Boyka, I got to dance with a friend I met earlier this evening when I played the English envoy in The King and I got to dance with Jeanette MacDonald. And we had such a good time. What a broad that is. And when I got to know her, she's rehearsing white pants and a white halter. Jeanette MacDonald, the busloads came from fans from all over. And as we got to know each other in rehearsal, we had a scene together and a dance, a big dance at the ball. I said, Miss MacDonald, you've danced with Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy. And of course, Nelson Eddy and Maurice Chevalier. How do I stack up with them? And she said, Charles, you have something none of them have. And don't, if you ever meet them, don't ever say I told you this. I won't, Miss MacDonald. What do I have that none of them had? And very sincerely she said, you're the tallest. She could get to where the heels she liked. I told you that I did a post road with Zazu Pitts. There was a young woman in it, an actress, who was terrific. Barbara Joyce, she was in a soap opera. And she had a husband who came, Howard Barker, to visit in Newport, and he was a head NBC set designer. And he thought I was funny. Can you imagine? He saw me in the play. I was 18, he thought I was funny. And they both liked me, so they set an appointment up with me with the president of the NBC, the National Broadcasting System, a man named Vincent J. Donahue, who was a great Broadway director. He did musicals like The Original Sound of Music with Mary Martin, and played like Ralph Bellamy in Sunrise at Campobello. He was a great director, and they brought him in as president so that he could improve the dimension of the acting when it came to all these live television shows they were planning, because television was just starting to be what we had all lived to see it become, this extreme, immense industry. My appointment was at 10 o'clock in the morning. And the secretary was very nice, always waiting, Mr. Reilly, come in. And I looked good, I had a Schwartzy suit on, and my uncle gave me a nice tie. I thought I looked good. The secretary was lovely. She'll be played by Joan Blondell. She said, he'll see you now. And she opened the door, and she was so lovely, she winked. And I went in, and you knew he was president because the office was unbelievable. It's what they call a corner suite. Only the big execs get it. With windows as far as the eye could see in the whole city skyline of New York City, where I was born. It'd be good luck. So I stood on the rug, and he was about 15, 20 feet away, sitting behind a gorgeous desk. What an elephant. And he had a cigarette lighter in his hand. And he looked at me for a few moments. And then he said, they don't let queers on television. It was a very short interview. And I walked to the elevator in the NBC building. I didn't have to have the voice say anything to me because it didn't even bother me. What kind of armor did I pick up in the 18 years I told you about? That something like that didn't bother me at all. Because I sensed there was something about that man that made his words inaccurate. And many years later, I read in the New York Times that the coroner's verdict on the death of Vincent J. Donahue was homicide. Mr. Donahue was murdered by a male hustler he picked up on 3rd Avenue outside of B.J. Clark. It's that kind of play. You see, you don't always meet dream droppers. Once in a while you meet a shit who deals in nightmares. But that didn't upset me. Never. It's going to be all right. I was upset when I went home to my $9 a week room and the only thing I had to eat was minute rice. But I couldn't because it was too filled with roaches. That's upsetting. I didn't care I wouldn't be on TV because a movement was starting that my friends were putting together. From class, Jason and Geraldine. They had a friend named Jose Quintero. Could hardly speak English, but he was a great director from Panama, and he founded the Circle in the Square. And he never saw them act, but he gave Geraldine the lead in Summer and Smoke because she was a bookseller that he liked in his favorite bookstore. And he gave Jason, for the same reason, the lead in the opening play of The Circle in the Square is theater, The Iceman Cometh. It made them both stars. He helped so many actors. Jose Quintero, played by Antonio Banderas. Off-Broadway had started a great movement, and I was in 22 off-Broadway shows from 1950 to 60. And Walter Kerr in the Herald Tribune wrote, "If I see Mr. Reilly's young, energetic face in one more opening number, I'm going to be sick." We get such support, isn't it? I was in one dreadful play after another. One was called, it was at the York Playhouse, which was a very, very distinguished off-Broadway house on York Avenue, the York Playhouse. We did a perfectly rotten play called The Saintliness of Marjorie Kemp, a restoration romp. I played Friar Bonaventure. I led the people over... It's so shitty. I led the people over the mountain. I had a big hat and a big staff. And a lousy part. The leading lady was my friend for life because we were born on the same day and we loved each other. The leading lady was a very young Frances Sternhagen, who was such a sweet woman. And the leading man, something else. His first off-Broadway play, he was so handsome. Very young. George Maharis. You know, every time I do that line and I get that kind of reaction, why do I feel like I'm playing San Francisco? He knows what Mae West knows. Anyway, Maharis was... They come right one after another in the second act. He was really good looking. And he played the man in black. He just had a black bandana and a black leather, very short vest, and his muscles. He was very beautiful, George. And his pants were black ballet tights. And because this was his first off-Broadway show and a very good party, he wanted to be noticed. So he chose not to wear a dance belt or a supporter. At the time, it was the biggest thing off Broadway. I was there! Still couldn't save the shitty play. I had a singing audition with a little boy. He'd just come from the University of Miami. And a girl that took singing lessons with me, she was so young and pretty, Phyllis Newman. She still is young and pretty. Friends forever, my friends. Phyllis Newman recommended me because they were friends at the University of Miami. She said, I recommended you to my friends, so here's the audition tomorrow, you go down 10th Street. So I went down to this little apartment, one-room apartment. He was a cute little boy. He was like not a man, he was a boy, just out of college. And he was very tiny, he had tiny little hands, and he had a tiny little piano, and there was no furniture in this dump except like an ironing board that came out of the wall with a stick. And a toaster and a coffee cup. And he had little shoes like a Chinese woman. So he asked me what I was going to sing, my first singing audition. I said I'm going to sing Marianne from The New Moon. I played the part this summer. Only don't look at me. Please don't look at me when I sing. I said don't look at me. Because I get nervous if someone looks at me when I sing. So you look to the wall and I'll sing to the wall. Now here I am going around New York to try to be a professional singer. With one slight stipulation. I can't have anybody look at me while I sing. When I finished singing and dazzling him with my high note, which you heard earlier, he said, you're in the show. Oh, wow. He said, you're the comedian. So I put that in the bag. Because it seemed to come from a good source. Because that was the morning I met Jerry Herman, my lifelong friend. We did an off-Broadway show together called Parade. And we ran in the morning to get the Times Review. What Brooks Atkinson, the Dean of Critics, was going to write about Mr. Herman's music. The New York Times. My friend Neil Simon says it's only official if it appears in the New York Times. And Brooks Atkinson wrote, you've heard of Johnny One Note? Let's welcome Jerry One Note. And I saw my little friend get smaller and the blood go out of his head. About 2 years ago, I went with my little Jerry with the little shoes when he became the longest running composer in the history of the American theater. Little Jerry Herman beat out Rodgers and Hart, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Sondheim, everyone, Kander and Ed. Mr. Herman became the longest running composer in the history of Broadway. He was close to his mother who never lived to see him, see his success. His mother was a wonderful woman, not like mine. And he came home once from school, and the house was decorated. He was about 9 years old, and Grandma's best silver was out, and the flowers were everywhere, and there was the beautiful lace on the table, and the house smelled so good. And he said, Mom, what's this? It's not a holiday. It's not a birthday. Mom, why does the house look all beautiful? Why does it look like this? And his mother said, because it's today. And 30 years later, Angela Lansbury sang that song in Maine. It's today. She taught him how to celebrate just today. He played for my first Broadway show, and I got in. It was Bye Bye Birdie. I was in that 2 years, and I took away Dick Van Dyke and Cheetah Rivera for the rest of my life. And then Robert Morris got me a lead in How to Succeed in Business. And Abe Burrows helped me. He became my mentor. I learned more about acting and words and structure and directing from Abe Burrows. A dream dropper with an awfully bad tick who smelled of canoe cologne. Thanks, Essie, for delivering the paper. Actors act all the time. It's so terrible. I'll tell you a funny story. I wasn't planning to, but actors act all the time. I go into my supermarket and I have the fish man is very nice. And I stood there at the counter and I said, I want a half a pound of the 1995, the large shrimp, and I need those 2 pieces of the sea bass. This guy walks by with the wagon and said, "You guys, you're always on!" First time in my life I was off. Can't win. I like that. And then after How to Succeed in Business, where Frank Lesser wrote me my song, God, he was funny. What a wonderful man. My first song was called Coffee Break. And I sang it, and he said to me after the thing has been, oh, he was adorable, he was so tiny. He said, you're not singing the melody right. It's an octave. Beep-ba-dum-bum, beep-ba-dum-bum, it's an octave. You're not singing the melody right. I said, what melody? Did you see Peggy Lee singing this song? Does Frank Sinatra record Coffee Break? Are the Ames brothers singing it? No, just me. I'll sing it the way I want because it's a stinky song. They do write band songs. I just did a Gershwin musical. I sang 9 songs in Strike Up the Band. The worst songs Gershwin ever wrote in the world. They write bad songs too once in a while. Anyway, to get on with this gorgeously laid second act. Those are the plays I was in, and then little Jerry wrote Hello Dolly. And he wrote me some wonderful songs, and I was in that forever. But it got me a big penthouse. I was sitting in my penthouse one night, not aware that of these 3 great musicals that I participated in, the greatest for many reasons was just about to come along. I was watching television.
Scorpion.
It makes you really happy to call me names.
Us. The most horrible excuse for you and me.
And then the phone rang at that hour. It's like 2 o'clock.
No matter what.
You get nervous when it rings at like at 2 o'clock. So I turned off the TV. Do you realize that Ed Decker pays an assistant stage manager $35 extra a performance just to ring this phone? I say tonight we make him work for it. Back to the plot. Hello? Sigh! What is the... No, sorry, I was up. I was just watching The Late Late Show, John Barrymore and Carol Lombard at 20th Century. Yeah. Weren't they funny? Oh my God. Si, I love you, I can come. Yeah, we're lucky. Yeah, 5:30 I'll be in front of the building. Yeah, it's now it's 10 after 2. Okay, Phil has the address, it's the same as when I was in How to Succeed. Okay, I'll be out front in the building. Si, I love you. All right, I'll see you in a little while. I have to pack. Emily Dickinson once wrote that you never know how tall you are until you're asked to rise. And that was Cy Feuer of the great team of Feuer and Martin, the producers who won so many Pulitzer Prizes and Tonys for such shows as How to Succeed, Guys and Dolls, Where's Charlie Kingsley, and Silk Stocking. Little Me. They had a new show trying out at the Fisher Theater in Detroit. It had played 3 weeks and it had 4 weeks to go, and it was sold out. Subscription audiences, 3,300 seats this time. And a few hours ago, after the Saturday night performance, the leading man, an English actor named Victor Spinetti, quit. He didn't like the rewrite. And he went to the airport and flew back to London. Well, that could be upsetting to a producer. So Cy called me and asked me if I could come in 3 hours to Detroit Sunday, today, and go on tomorrow night, Monday night, in the leading role in this big musical. It was doing well because it starred Miss Julie Harris, who was the first lady of the American theater. It was the thing nightmares are made of. It's Sunday, tomorrow's Monday, I'll be opposite Julie Harris in a big Broadway musical. I haven't seen the script, I haven't heard the music. Julie Harris played opposite James Dean, Montgomery Clift, Marlon Brando, Paul Newman, Anthony Quinn, Anthony Hopkins, Christopher Plummer, Walter Matthau, Rex Harrison, and tomorrow night she'll be playing opposite me. And the voice in my head said, why not? It's her next logical step. I had a thing like that or I'd go crazy. But I love Cy Feuer. Cy Feuer was always good to me. His wife, I would go during How to Succeed to West Hampton, get off the train in the dark, and she would lead a string with flags on it a few blocks to get into my bedroom. And in front of the door was hot coffee and a couple of drinks. For 2 years, I had friends like that. So I came to Cy. It was based on Dream Girl. The music was by Jimmy Van Heusen and Sammy Cahn. And the dances was by the magnificent Michael Kidd. The name of the musical was Skyscraper, based on Elmer Rice's play Dream Girl. And I had my first rehearsal with Miss Harris. I had never met her. This was almost 40 years ago. And we didn't even meet that awful, cold, rainy Sunday when I got there because everyone's so nervous when a big Broadway show is in trouble. Like both Bye Bye Birdie and Hello Dolly were. Truly. But you work and you fix it. So we had our first rehearsal and my timing was different than Victor Spinetti, and she went up in the line. I walked out into the footlights and I said, Cy! Where did you get her? I said, I have to have it fast. I've got a dresser waiting. It must be crisp. Let's try it again, please. It must be like that. It's got to go like that. It wasn't me talking. It was John Barrymore from the night before yelling at Carol Lombard. It's the thing that stuck in my mind. I was ready to go to a hospital. To think of what I was going to do. I got there yesterday. I was carrying on like I was Yul Brynner in the 39th year of The King and I. We got through it perfectly. The first act. The rehearsal went beautifully. Everybody was excited, and I went to my dressing room to get my mustache and change my costume and my makeup. And Miss Harris was ahead of me, and she reached in into her dressing room, and she came out with this. And Miss Harris, as Julie said the first words to Charles, almost 40 years ago, "Mr. Reilly, this is for you." Oh, wow. John Perrione. Thank you, Miss Harris. And then she said, "Mr. Reilly, I think we're going to be all right." Yeah, they seem to like it. And I did pretty good. I'm so, so much on my mind, nothing could go wrong. I mean, it's crazy. Miss Harris, I want to tell you what a great honor it is to act with you. I saw you from the second balcony of the Bush Memorial. In Sundown Beach, that's right. But I like this way better. I like being closer better. And to act with you, Miss Harris, I can't tell you. Thank you for this. I have to go put my mustache on and change my costume. I can't be standing around talking to actresses. Larry Gelbar said that if they ever found Hitler alive, the only just punishment would be to send him to Detroit. In the winter! With a musical that was in trouble. Well, I went to Detroit in the winter with a musical that was in trouble. But he was wrong because I met Miss Julie Ann Harris, who became my life. Mr. Reilly, I think we're going to be all right. That's such an understatement. We should be arrested for the fun that we've had in the 40 years. I directed her in 14 plays. She made me direct her. We had the most wonderful time. Had the most wonderful laughs. She changed my life that dreary day. When we rehearsed, she kept doing more. Do more, Charles. It's wonderful. Put that in the bag, Miss Harris. Do more. It's wonderful. She loved Emily Dickinson. She would sit in dressing room after the show and spout this poetry of Emily Dickinson. And I, being an outdoor rugged man, knew nothing of poetry. That Emily Dickinson was something else. I think it's our very best writer, not poet. Her letters, I think she's our finest writer. I truly do. I made a play for Miss Harris called The Belle of Amherst. Nobody wanted it. Nobody, because nobody wanted Miss Dickinson. And if you create a play for someone like Paul Robeson or Zelda Fitzgerald or Oscar Levant or Enrico Caruso, you get the same echo and calm and rhythm of their lives. And Miss Dickinson's was rejection. So we were rejected for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, but we finally got to Broadway and she won the Tony, the Emmy, and the Grammy. And the play was playing on Broadway when we got an invitation to go to the White House from President Ford and Betty for the bicentennial to meet Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, and the next day to unveil a postage stamp for Emily Dickinson. I couldn't wear Schwartzy suit because it said white tie and tails. When you go to the White House, I've been many times. Don't you love that kind of an egomaniacal? I have. Oh my God, your mouth falls open. The chairs are hard. There's such shifting all night. I know, darling. These chairs are so difficult. That's why I don't like to play Europe. The all night buttocks move like it's musical. Wear a darker clothing and you wouldn't, it's not that noticeable. So anyway, back to the plot. What plot? Where's the plot? You go there, you're met by, your legs are cold by now, right? Wait till the finale in 2 hours. You're met by the chief of protocol. And who was the chief of protocol in 1976, the bicentennial? Even Alex Trebek wouldn't know. You heard of her.
Yeah.
Shirley Temple Black. Oh. Wow. You see, when I meet these people, I'm still an usher. Part of me will always be an usher. When I go out with Aunt Margaret, I'll always be an usher. She's terrific, by the way. And we put in alphabetical order, the guests. On the great lawn, the women on that side in alphabetical order, and the men in this side in alphabetical order. Because it makes it easy for the introductions to Her Majesty. So there's so many servicemen and women, beautiful uniforms and the flags and the music. Every place you go in the White House grounds, there's a different kind of music. On the stairways, in the lawns. And this Marine came with a clipboard to put the R's in alphabetical order. By tying tails. Reagan! Reilly! Rockefeller! Just 3 guys on the town. Ron, how are the horses? You know, Mr. Governor, I was born in the Bronx. The Bronx. The Bronx, it's in New York. I was born in the Bronx, so when I see the lights of the Los Angeles airport, when my plane comes in, Mr. Governor, I realize that Los Angeles is my home. And once you're past the earthquakes and the landslides and the fires and the floods and the smog and the pollution and the drive-by shootings and the police corruption and the riots and parking at the music center. Ron, it's a charming city. Mr. Vice President Nelson, may I call you? It's the same name as now. Nelson, Nelson, Nelson to you, Majesty. Of course, you're from the Nelsons of the Celtic in Britain. I'm from the Nelsons of the Bronx. The Bronx. The Bronx was discovered by Jonas L. Bronx in 1637. It's a fascinating story, perhaps I'll tell you at dinner. And then we went under the portico to meet the Queen. A real one! She came out on the portico under all the television lights, and she had on every crown jewel that the empire ever had. She had medals and jewels and sashes with jewels. She had a hubcap of emeralds on her ass. Sashes with all of these jewels and chokers of this shit. And I thought, how did she get all this stuff in the overhead rack? Unbelievable! That's a bicentennial. What's she gonna wear, polyester? Her crown was the size of an inner tube. It was all separate diamonds. It was unbelievable. And when she hit those TV lights, everyone went, oh! And Miss Harris went, I could play it better. I kept seeing my mother and father because they were the only friends I had. It was time soon for me to go to Hollywood to begin part 2 of my life. You know, you never know. Your mother and father, they're like a puzzle, and you can't fit it together in your lifetime. Why can't a man go with Mr. Disney? Why is it my mother's favorite word was no? The ends of their lives were very happy. My father ran away with a girlfriend. He did. Her name was Miss Marion. And the neighbor said that she had Harlequin glasses, and she had garish makeup and was overdressed. So she'll be played by Dame Edna. And I'm happy that she'll be my stepmother. Because then I won't be the oddest one in the family. And they went to move to that city of passion. Poughkeepsie. I said, Daddy, why Poughkeepsie? He said he knows all the big shots there. And my mother, who never let anything be done for her. I found out that when Walt Disney almost took us to California, my grandmother, you remember her? The special effects in a production like this are awesome. My grandmother said to my mother, Signe, she said, Signe, you are the oldest child. You must look after Benny and Lily because they're not whole. Signe, they're not all there. And I have cancer. And you must promise me that you'll always look after your younger brother and sister. Because the Swedish family has to stick together. My mother wore black all the time. That was a form of mourning. Her favorite word was no. My father couldn't do anything for her. That's why she couldn't leave them. My uncle and aunt had the worst lives of any two people I could imagine. They had horrific lives. Both ended in insane asylum for many years. And so my mother punished herself because she felt she failed her mother's one suggestion. My Hollywood career, that's just a phony line, isn't it? My Hollywood career started with an audition about 1938 with a lovely, sweet, small man named Gene Reynolds, who became the president of the Academy and was one of the great directors and creators of television shows like MASH and that kind of show, Lou Grant. And he took a liking to me, and he gave me a 7-minute part in the pilot of The Ghost of Mrs. Muir. And I came to California. It was 78 degrees in February. Oh my God, how long has this been going on? I fell in love because I had never irradiated till I was 30 when they reconverted the building on Sullivan Street. I would never be cold again. And people were so nice to me here, like in New York. Hope Lang was a dream dropper. She dropped in my bag, "Don't let him go. He's funny." So they made me a regular. Don't let him go, he's funny. So I was nominated for my first 2 Emmys. And lost my first 2 Emmys to Werner Klemperer. Who was my best friend. He's so good, he's funny. Werner, so elegant. So she's a dream dropper. Then I worked with all these wonderful people, and I started doing the game shows in New York with Mark Goodson because he said to me, "If you ever need a job, Charles," 40 years ago he said this, You could always work for me. You call me immediately. So I worked for him for 40 years. And you're not supposed to do game shows. It's very below you. You're nothing if you do game shows. They said there's not enough parts for blacks. There's not enough parts for browns or Asians. There's a blacklist. None of that is anything compared to what if you do a game show. If I get nominated for 2 Tonys in a row for directing a Broadway play, the only American director in 2 years, Canadian and English, I was the only American, they say. Yeah, but he was on Celebrity Bowling. It doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to end up a game show fixture. But I shall go on with my private little one play. All right, so now, I was on 15 game shows a week. I was on Steve Allen. I co-hosted his show. One of the game shows went nighttime, so that's 20 game shows. I did the wonderful Juliet Mills' show, The Nanny and the Professor. I had 2 children's shows. I met these marvelous people, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra. Angie Dickinson and I go out all the time for 40 years almost. She's some broad. About 5 years ago, we go to the same market, Hughes Market. And she's 4 lines over. Looking great. And there's about 3 people in each line. And there's about 8 lines. And I'm 4 lines over. And it's very quiet in the store. It's crowded. You hear the little things, the little machines checking out people. And in front of everybody, in front of all the lines, is the cover of the National Enquirer with Angie and her 19-year-old boy toy. We don't want your kind in this store! There's children in these aisles! We're a half a block from St. Michael's and the Old Angel. Shop elsewhere! But when 2 people love each other, you talk that way. We laugh all the time. I'll go to a funeral with her. We went to our friend, we loved Doug McClure so much, what a lovely man. We went to his funeral, she was never next to me. Then she comes at the end and she says, oh, I'm sorry. I just hate to pew hop. What a broad. And all these people. And I got to looking in the TV guide because I couldn't believe it. I was on television and I got to counting the week, the issue that's going to come. See, the pill's wearing off now. It's almost over. I get into the habit of getting the one for next week, the TV guide. Old actor has to look at cover to see name. And I would count how many times my name was in. Not the name of the show, had to be my name. And I would count. And one week, my name was in 27 times. And it was taking time from teaching, which is what I feel I do the best and what is the closest to my heart. But it was so unbelievable. 27 times. And they told me years before that I would not be allowed on television. Now I got to try to find out, who do you have to fuck to get off? The show is almost over. This is longer than Nicholas Nickel, baby. made everybody nervous. I was on over 100 times with Mr. Carson. He was so wonderful. I started in black and white. And every night he'd say, "Good night, Charles, you were never funnier." Thank you, Mr. Carson. Johnny Carson. In the beginning it was 90 minutes, and you could stretch. And I was very proud of what I did on one show. I came out first and talked about my boat and such silliness. I always wore a tuxedo simply because I had nothing else to wear. And then this woman came on, and they were honoring her. She was about 75 to 80 years old, and she was like rude. In the makeup and the hair, she was very, very rude, snotty. And she was there because she had a talk show on the NBC affiliate in Chicago that went through the roof with the ratings. Can you believe it? Went through the roof, this 78-year-old woman. And they showed film clips from it, and she had something. My God, this is the first time I had any rating in the 10 to 11 o'clock weekdays time slot. So Johnny brought her, and she talked, and then she said, "Johnny, you know, I'm the chairman of Shakespeare in the Park. This summer we're doing Shakespeare in the Park in Chicago, and we're bussing in children to hear Shakespeare's words for the first time. It's so exciting. I'm chairman of the board. We have the most marvelous Chicago actors. And you want to see who gives a shit lady, but you can't say who gives a shit lady." So I said, "You know, I love Shakespeare too." She said, "Did you hear that, Johnny? What would someone like you know about Shakespeare?" Oh, fun. Wow. I don't mind being insulted. I was insulted last week at the California Pizza Company. That places. But I don't like to be insulted in living color. That can go into every home in the world, because Mr. Carson's show did go there. So remember what Emily Dickinson said, "You never know how tall you are until you're asked to rise." So in living color, I rose. I looked at her. I said, "Doc, can I have some chords, please?" I have heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have by the very cunning of the scene been struck so to the soul that presently they proclaim their malefactions. For murder, though it have no tongue, will speak with miraculous organ. I'll have these players play something like the murder of my father before mine uncle. I'll observe his looks. I'll tempt him to the quick if he but blench. I know my course. The spirit that I have seen. It may be the devil. I and the devil have the power to assume a pleasing shape. And perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. I'll have grounds more relative than this. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. Anything else you want to know, lady? I am an acting teacher. Every comedian wants to be Hamlet. It's pathetic. Oh, I forgot to tell you. The part of the rude woman on the Tonight Show will be played by Dr. Laura Schlesinger. Dinah Shore, where are you when we need you? And that other one I can't stand. The broad that does Missing Links. Is that the name of that? Missing Links? Well, it should be Missing Links. Weakest Links. Weak Links, weakest Link. Where did they get her? That costume, she makes Dracula looked like Pee Wee Herman. Anyway. It's almost over. My best friend is Burt Reynolds, and sometimes he would co-host for Johnny. And he was voted the most popular guest host, because he's just wonderful. My friend, Mr. Reynolds. The man just looked at his watch. And he would always put me on next to Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson. 3 guys on the show. And he would even buy me cowboy boots so it would all match from the knees down.
Charles Bronson said, "Do you ride, Charlie?"
I said, "Like the wind." My friend Burt Reynolds and Clint Eastwood were fired the same day from Universal. They were brought on the rug and they were fired. Mr. Reynolds was told he couldn't act, and Mr. Eastwood was told his Adam's apple was too big. My friend. So they went back to their parking spaces and their names were already removed. So Mr. Reynolds spoke to his friend Mr. Eastwood over the car, and he said, "Well, I can take acting lessons. What are you going to do?" I met Mr. Reynolds 46 years ago. When he opened the door, when I went over to rehearse with David Edison, he was staying there in George Quick's apartment. Everybody stayed in George Quick's apartment because he had a few bucks, and nobody had any money. And he said, "My name is Buddy Reynolds. I just came from Jupiter, but I did a summer stock season in Hyde Park." I said, "Hi." He gave me 2 tickets. In that moment, to see him on Broadway that night as Mannion in a revival of Mr. Roberts with Charlton Heston and Orson Bean. Orson Bean's in my class at Miss Hawkins. The first moment I met him, he gave me something. I'm going to see him not this week, but next week. The last time I spoke to him, he gave a friend of mine an extraordinary part in a motion picture. A person he never even met or knew. But he trusted me. My rabbi friend called from New York named Abi. They're going to honor Mr. Reynolds in October, next month, for his work. He's the chairman of the Chabad Children of Chernobyl. He and John Voight worked very close on that. And last year he got the John Houseman Award, which is a very prestigious award for humanitarianism. And this week, Friday, he's getting the Luzerne, he's getting a film festival award. And he's in Paris now. And he calls these years his charming years. In the meantime, since I met him when he was a teenager, he became the most popular motion picture star in the history of the cinema, which he did. But I never knew anyone other than the boy that opened the door. We have a lot of fun. Not doing things you think we should do. Or we have fun because sometimes he has to go 6 hours to the dentist, and I love to sit there with him. And whenever he takes the plane, I'll say, "I'll go in the car with you." To spend time with him is so uplifting to me. He's an extraordinary man. You see, he gives me gifts. But the things in gold and the French hand-painted dishes are seen. The unseen gifts are what he excels with, and all his friends. The gifts of support and trust and belief. Things didn't always go well in my life. At all. But if you have someone like Mr. Reynolds and Julie Harris and my childhood friend Roberta Peters, who put me into the opera, you don't need anybody else. Because they're all going anyway. He opened a theater And all the great actors came because he wanted the young people to see them, the Charles Sheens and the Ed Begleys and the Richard Baseharts. Charles Durning did 7 plays. What a joy to work with Charles Durning. He's as filthy as Mae West. The limericks alone. What a lovely man. When the theater was about 17 years old, he changed the name of it from the Burt Reynolds Theater to the Charles Nelson Reilly stage. And I felt like John Paul Getty or something with the big gold letters. And it was on November 30th, that's my mother's birthday, 1992. And all my friends came and they entertained, and the graduates that were on Broadway shows came up because it was New York. And it was a wonderful, wonderful evening that my friend made for me. And when he gave me this beautiful theater and the stage, he said, "This is their stage, because I want you to know that this is indeed the stage your mother always said you would save it for." She's a very sentimental football player. When I taught there for 18, 19 years, he gave me a beach house on a private island, not Jupiter, Jupiter Island. Eat your heart out, Monaco. The names on the mailbox as you drove down the little road was DuPont and Carnegie. I had the second house on the island. The first was Mrs. Bush's, the mother of the then President George Bush, the grandmother of our current president, and the great-grandmother of those 2 little drunks. On this side was a very dear man, John Deere. He had a lot of tractors in the backyard. What a neighborhood! Hot water, heat, everything. So Mr. Reynolds brought me to the house to give me the keys to this estate. And he couldn't go in. He said, "Charles, I thought I could go in, but I can't go in. It's the house I had with Sally Field, and I thought I could." Isn't that funny? I just, it's been too many years and too many memories. I can't. I thought I could. I can't go in. I'm sorry. I just can't. Give me the keys. I hardly knew her. But when you love someone for 46 years, you can talk to them that way. And I would come home after teaching, and I would sit in this beautiful home and make what I make every single day in Manhattan. That's made with rye or bourbon. It's my favorite drink. My friend Johnny Sullivan taught me how to make it when I was 15 in the Whitby Hotel in New York City. And then you put a splash of sweet vermouth. Just whoop, that's it. And this is the Manhattan. Now you're supposed to have its logo as a cherry. But you want to know something? You don't need the cherry at all. And every time I have my Manhattan, I can't get over the fact how much it looks like beef broth. I come home and I wonder if I was a good teacher. Miss Hagen made me a teacher 41 years ago. But I didn't sit at her desk, I sat in the back for a while like that. To be a teacher, what a word to say. You have to earn that. And she was extraordinary. What I wanted to do was to be like her. To make the contribution she has made to not only the list you heard earlier, but to the thousands of lives that she touched. She's coming to Broadway in a new play now, and she's 83. She just closed a 6-month run with my friend David Hyde Pierce and a big hit in Los Angeles. 6 dance lessons in 6 weeks. She danced her ass off at 82. She'll be 83 when the play goes to Broadway. The school still stands at 3 buildings. It's $7 a week now, though. And if you don't have the $7, go in anyway. It's okay. How do you thank people for that? A lifetime of that. Miss Hagen taught us. See, it's not like teaching arithmetic or a language or history. It's not in a book. Each one is different. You teach each one in a different way. And then when they started to win awards and get good jobs and Academy Awards and Tonys and Emmys, and I read their reviews and plays, I think maybe I am a teacher. Maybe I could be a teacher. Maybe I'll sit at the desk. I do. Hagen taught us that the roots of what you do on the stage are with the other actors. And that group on the list figured out that that broad was not teaching acting. She was teaching life. Because in life, the roots of what you do are with the other people. The roots of what you do are with the other people. And I teach master classes now. In very distinguished universities, like I like to go to Northwestern and Fordham, and it's wonderful throughout the country. The high schools of performing arts are so wonderful. And UCLA. And I have to be careful because I can't use the same voices I used on the Gong Show. So I go teach my master classes and these little kids look at me as if to say, what's somebody from the game show network doing here? But you see what they don't know. But they find out soon enough. Is that when I sit down to teach, I do not sit alone. I sit with Cinderella of the Bronx, and I sit with Mr. Benedetti, and I sit with Mrs. Tresky, and I sit with Uta Hagen and Herbert Berghoff and Julie Harris, and I sit with Mr. Burt Reynolds and Neil Simon and Abe Burrows and Frank Lesser. And I sit with all the pupils that I ever had, the 40 that died to the AIDS virus, that I hear sing every single day. When I sit down with Molly Pecan, Mae West is usually busy, but she tries to come. And we all sit down together. And boy, we make a very good group. Because these are the people that made me what I am. These are the roots of what I do. Each and every one of them make me the man I was born to be. When I was brought in the world so long ago by Dr. Leon Brodsky, the Royal Hospital on the Grand Concourse. I came home from teaching and I heard this an awful screeching, howling on the beach, and I ran out. Oh my God, it was a pelican. A pelican had washed up, all wrapped up like in a bowl with all this heavy fish line, and the hook was in its mouth and the sinker was in its eye, and his neck was bleeding because the heavy cord was under the feather. He couldn't breathe. And I ran in to get a scissor. I'll help you. Don't peck me like some ostriches. These are big birds on the Atlantic side. So I start to cut all of the line. There was so much around his wings and wet feet, but the dangerous part was around the neck, because I couldn't see where the cord was because it was bleeding and under the feathers. So I just had to take a chance. Hold on, please. I got it! Breathe! I got it! God say breathe! It's good, we got it! Now the hook, I'll get the hook out. Okay, there. Now the sinker didn't hurt the eye, look. It didn't hurt the eye, it looks good. Okay. My God. He seems all right. I thought if I pushed him into the water with his neck and everything, it'd heal faster. So I started to push him and he went. I said, what? I'm sorry, I don't understand. Oh my God. You can't take off from the sand. So if we sit here and wait, the tide will come in, and the tide will go under you, and the tide will take you out. He told me that. My God. My father knew Walt Disney. My father would have loved to have drawn you. He loved to paint feathers. He really did. You should see the feathers in Marlene Dietrich's hat in The Scarlet Empress. And Walt Disney could have made you a star, my daddy's friend. You could be Pebbles! Pebbles the Pelican! Walt Disney proudly presents the adventures of Pebbles the Pelican. Why should Bambi and Dumbo have it all? Heavens. Emily Dickinson would have loved you too. She loved all God's creatures, especially birds. The whippoorwill, and she loved the owl and the crow and the woodpecker and the sparrow and the wren and the nightingale. Ooh, a bird came down the walk today. He did not know I saw. He bit an angleworm in halves and ate the fellow raw. She was funny too. No, Pebbles, she never wrote about a pelican. She never saw you, that's why. She never went out of her house. Why, Pebbles, if she saw you, she would write the most mighty stanza. I never saw a moor, I never saw the sea, yet know I what the heather is. And what a wave must... He was right, the tide came in one swish, he was way out! Look, what if he couldn't swim? What if the heavy fish line broke the delicate bones in his wing? What if he couldn't fly? I've only had one drink, I swear. But he turned around in the water and he did this with his right wing to me. And then he took off. Goodbye! If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. Look, it's going to be a beautiful sunset. You know, my mother never let me go near the water. Look what happened to Aunt Lily. I said, I know, Ma, she fell through the ice, I know. I never went to the public school, the pools, in the streets, or I never went to the beach with the Italian kids. I wonder what my mother would say if she saw me now. With the whole Atlantic Ocean at my feet in front of my friend's most beautiful home. She'd say, what are you doing so near the water, Charles? I don't know, Ma. I guess I'm just living the life of Reilly. show is so short, the pill ran a year ago it ran out. I have 2 pupils here tonight. And, but they graduated, but they're very distinguished artists. And what the girl, and why I like them is because he just gave her a big diamond ring. And they met in my class. So I should have got an invitation to free dinner, everything. The girl, Alison Crowley, starred last summer in New York, a Peter Matt's musical called The Gory Details. And she co-starred with my friend Julie Harris in a show I directed, Ladies in Retirement. And both she and Jerry O'Donnell played for many years with Jose Quintero, the great director, in one-act plays that they used to do in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Mr. Quintero thought they were wonderful actors. You've seen Jerry a lot because he causes a lot of trouble in The Young and Restless. It's my honor to introduce pupils. Allison and Jerry! Where are you? We're going to cut the show before New York. This is so long, but we don't know what to cut out. I love it. And that's, you know what I mean? It's funny.
It is.
So the point is that you come here like 3 days ago. My friend Tony Kirshner, the playwright, said, heaven is a city very much like San Francisco. So thank you tonight. And I want to thank the crew that are filming this for posterity. You were so did it quit already? I'd like to say there's a big party for the film crew, but this theater, there's no budget for shit. See these gladiolas? They have to last till Sunday. We get them Tuesday! And they have to last till Sunday. And like Thursday, Friday, I come in and they're having a meeting, the bosses. Will they last till Sunday? And they're like hanging down, like shit. And someone says if you take the first inch off, it grows. And they do make it by Sunday, but you really should try to drive by like Sunday at 5 or 5 to take a look at it. Well, now it's time for a real Manhattan. Thank you, good night, it's a long show. Old actors can smell Kodak.